السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأصلي وأسلم على من بعث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi everyone, and welcome to this month's Ummatics Colloquium. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Dr. Jamel Akbar, a theorist and professor of architecture. We apologize for starting somewhat late, so I'm going to dispense with all introductions and just read the title of today's talk. It's taken from the name of his magnum opus, Qas Al-Haq, an alternative to capitalism, nation state. So, Dr. Jamil, I'm going to hand over to you. فلتتفضل مشكورا إن شاء الله.
Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Can we have the slides?
So the slides are still
Everyone?
downloading, but if it's as soon as it's available, we can we
Okay.
will upload them. inshallah.
Let me start with the following. Maybe it's appropriate for you guys living in the Western culture. You are the first line of scholars, theorists, and dua to call non-Muslims for Islam. Now, the traditional, maybe I'm wrong, attitude is that when we call them to Islam, we concentrate more on values, on the oneness of God, on alcoholism and sexualism and so on, and how bad is life, miserable if we don't follow Islam, and maybe if we are good guys, caring about neighbors and so on, we could attract more people to Islam. But let me propose another thing, another approach. Maybe this approach might not interest those living in the West, whether about the oneness of God or gayism or whatever, because they are living the crisis of climate change, pollution. Those issues might interest them more, and they may know Islam through those issues, and then they may come to Islam. Now, I have 3 points here that will connect to our lecture for you guys living in the West that might be used as an introduction to Islam, dealing with the issues that they are suffering from, which is climate change and pollution. Let's remember 2 positions. The first one, if I ask Bill Gates to work for me, he's a millionaire. No matter how much I pay him, he will reject. However, if I ask a poor guy who has 4 or 5 kids and they don't have anything to eat, if I ask him to work for me just to feed his kids for 1 day, he might accept. I hope we will remember this equation. It's very obvious, but it makes a lot of difference. Now, in most factories, those who work there are flogged day and night, and they work very hard just to make a living, which means production of goods is to the highest in history because there are people who are flogged and needy and they are forced to work. This is one. So if we manage to eliminate this group of people who are flogged to work very hard, production will take another path. Now, the second point is that of those people, the needy people, they don't exist and the employment level is almost zero. Those who have capital they want to invest, it would be difficult for them to do that without hiring people with high wages, or they have to work together as partners in the factories or the business they have. Now, it would be insane for them, if they own what they work in, to pollute the sites that they're working in. It makes much sense, if they want to make profit, to hire people and they live, let's say he's a millionaire, live in Switzerland and he opened factories, maybe in Bangladesh, in India, in Brazil. Because if that factory pollutes, he is not there. So we have two issues now, that if we eliminated unemployment and people were well off, we could deal with, oh, thank you for the slides. We could, can I have the next one, please? So I talked about two phenomena leading to pollution and climate change. The third one is that if one look at the settlements in the world these days, we have megacities, we have villages, we have towns, and so on. This situation is caused because the states has the wealth, they have the jobs in the capitals, they decide where to invest, and people are drawn to those sites. So the sites, if you like, some are wealthy, some are poor. And the people are drawn into wealthy sites, and this is very well known. Now, with Islam, the first two phenomena, which is slashing people to work, and people has to work in the factories if they own them, will be eliminated, and that what I will show. The third phenomena, which is the location of the cities and their sizes, Islam, through hukuk, will lead to a situation in which people will live on the sites that has the resources. So cities like Riyadh, like Cairo, like Amman, that doesn't have the resources will not appear. They will be smaller in size. Now, if people live on the sites that has the resources, in this case, and if those towns are producing their own goods, in this case, the people, the societies will not be forced to constantly move goods from one side to another. Now, in new theories of economy, when I say new, I mean after modernity, production is based, and to make sense, in utilizing maximally the capabilities of the site, its resources. Now, if we in our site, we can produce, let's say, better cars, it makes sense that we give you car, you in that town, you produce olives, we take from you olives. So there is always exchange, and that's good for all. This mentality led to the maximum movement of goods, and this will lead to pollution. Plus, this system is based on a conviction that there is always unemployed people and they will be flagged to work harder to produce more. Then it makes sense what we produce, because there is unemployed people, we flag them, they work harder, the extra will go to other towns. Now, if we thought in a system that this may not happen, of course, I'm not talking about iPhones, they have to be manufactured in one place. But it doesn't make sense to export onions from Europe to Africa. So there is a level of balance in which that will be reached in societies that depend much on its own resources. Let's say a town lives on olive. They try to make everything from olive. They will use olive leaves, olive trees, trunks, and most of their life needed things. Now, if we manage to convince non-Muslims that, look, Islam will lead to sustainable environments through eliminating certain things like unemployment, like moving things from place to place, not forcibly, not by governments, no. It will happen through the people. I'll explain how. Next slide, please. So what's happening now, there is, if you like, an intellectual impasse in the Western culture, that they know very well and convinced that their systems of capitalism, nation state, leading them to more pollution. They want to find an exit. They want to find new theories, new approaches, new paradigms to come out of this. So, to come out of this intellectual impasse, humanity is can we okay. To come out of this intellectual impasse, humanity is searching for a system that is fair, open, and transparent, a system that is based on meritocracy. After all, after the fall of communism, history has ended for Qiyamah. Capitalism triumphant. We heard about liberal democracy, free market, and so on. And some argue that capitalism can't adjust itself to all new shocks and different situations. But poverty, pollution, climate change, habitat destruction, you all know these things. Next. So we have a intellectual impasse. And if we want to live, for example, like Australians, we need more than five times the size of the Earth to live like Australians. Next, please. Now, when one study the approaches of those theorists in the West, one realizes immediately that they are always thinking within the concept of nation state, within the concept of capitalism. They cannot go outside of that. Now, please read, if you're interested, a paper titled Property Rights and Civilizations. Next, please. In which I went through different thinkers to prove my point that they cannot think outside because they don't know Sharia. They cannot think outside Western paradigms. I discussed next, please, people like David Harvey. Uh, I go very fast so people can see the screens later when they see the uh, this episode later, and they can decide. Next, please, whether they will go to the paper or no. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. Other than David Harvey, he's a very well-known geographer who is using Marxism to criticize capitalism. Paul Mason. Next, please. Next, please. Christian Filber. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. Richard Florida is planner. Next, please. Jeremy Rifkin is very well known, who talks about the history of the future, proposing a way of to come out of this impasse. Next, please. Now, this is about Western researchers. What about Muslim scholars and researchers? Next. Now, there is 3 verses in Quran. It is the backbone of the economy in Islam. The first is آية الفيء. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ما أفاء الله على رسوله من القرى. I don't have to read the whole thing, but you will notice in the ayah, in the verse, that God is saying the money of fay should be distributed on the poor, the orphans, the son of the traveler, Ibn Sabil. So the money is directed not to the treasury or the Bayt al-Mal or the Ministry of Finance. It is not directed to the government. It is directed to people. Next verse, please. This is the verse of Zakah, Sadaqat. إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين. You will notice that it's going to 8 types of people. Those types of people are in need, orphans, masakin. It is for individuals. It is not for projects. It is not for Bayt al-Mal, for the treasury of the Muslims. It is not for the government. Next, please. This is the ayah of غنائم, booty. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. واعلموا أن ما غنمتم من شيء فأن لله خمسه. This verse says that if you won in a war and you have a booty, 4/5 of it will go to those participating in the battle. 1/5 will be divided among, and names the ayah those groups of individuals that they will take the 5th. And again, you notice that they are ذوي القربى, اليتامى, المساكين, ابن السبيل. Next, please. Now, a question will come to mind. If you read the books of Amwal about economy in tradition, like Al-Kharaj, Abu Yusuf, Al-Amwal, Abu Ubaid, their discussion centers around these 3 verses. And these 3 verses shows that money goes to people and not to the state. Now, a question will come to mind. How would a society run itself if the state doesn't have any money? How the Khalifa, if there is a Khalifa, and I will show that there is, inshallah, how does he act? What is his responsibility next? If one look at the responsibilities of the Khalifa before it is inflated, before it was inflated through ijtihad, one will realize that he has several responsibilities mentioned in Al-Bukhari. Next, please. Which is al-zakah, al-qada, al-shahadat, al-jihad, al-siyar. If one read those, one realize that they are not dealing with civil societies. They are dealing with problems if they occurred. Past slide, please. Go back, please. Back. Yes. They deals with issues if people had differences, they go to the Prophet or the Khalifa who will rule among them. See all the verses that talk about ruling in Quran. It says, وَأَنِحْكُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ وَأَنِحْكُمْ بَيْنَهُم بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهِ فَإِنْ جَاءُوكَ فَاحْكُمْ بَيْنَهُم بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهِ. It doesn't say وَأَحْكُمْهُم. Next, please. So the major 2 tasks or responsibilities for the authority is defending the country, jihad, rulings by the people if they have disputes, plus those ones that I'm showing here, which is الزكاة, المظالم, الجزية, الموادعة, الحدود, الديات, الإكراه, الاعتصام. Other than that, he doesn't have any responsibility, and those are minimal. Now, my argument in the book says the following. If we want to add to the responsibility of the Khalif or the ruler or the Hakim or whatever, we should prove that those additions will enhance the society. And I'm trying to show in the book that limiting ourselves to those mentioned by the Prophet and the Quran is sufficient to create a very powerful ummah. The minute we come out of those responsibilities that we give to the ruler, the whole system will be disbalanced. Next, please. Now, there is a very well-known argument. Most people argue that either organized societies such as democratic ones that are based on a political hierarchy that leads to bureaucracy. Bureaucracy, we cannot run away from bureaucracy. It is with us as long as there is nation state. Or an anarchy. Next, please. In other words, either a society with hierarchy and bureaucracy or a vacuum that leads to a chaos. The argument I'm proposing is that hukuk will fill that vacuum. Next, please. And I usually often get into trouble with people because it is so much entrenched in our head. It's difficult to come out of it, that if the state's responsibility is reduced, then it's chaos. What they don't see is that there is حقوق by Sharia will fill that vacuum. Now, why they say that? Because throughout history, I don't know why this happened. At that time in the past, they did not need it, but these days we need it, which is linking the different ahkam together to understand how حقوق works. If we don't link those ahkam together, I'll explain now how the examples, we will think Islam as it came to the Prophet is not suitable for us today. Therefore, by ijtihad, through masalih mursala, siyasa shar'iyya, and so on, we should make ijtihad and we should make new rules, new ahkam that will fit our daily needs today that is much different than the Prophet's day. Next. يعني in short, if we link أحكام of حقوق, the need for ijtihad will be diminished. I'm not saying ijtihad with everything. People can make ijtihad in everything. Ijtihad is needed, except with حقوق. Why? Because ijtihad with حقوق leads to injustice. Next, please. I'll explain now, inshallah. Let's take an example. Eminent domain, land expropriation, or taking people lands by force. Okay, eminent domain. There is hadith by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, لا يحل مال امرئ مسلم إلا بطيب النفس منه. According to this hadith, the jurists said, Maliki Shafi'i, the great imams, they said, Muslims' property cannot be confiscated without his permission, willingly. Next. Now let's imagine that there is a city center and the state has all the wealth and the people has to work in the city, and gradually movement out into the city became very crowded and more cars are needed and the street became quite narrow for cars. It makes a lot of sense to make the street wider, and it makes a lot of sense to tax the people and confiscate these lands, these areas, to make the street wider. Now what happened? If we did this, the city center becomes more active. The people in the center will have more wealth because they can sell their properties with higher price. Those who will buy it will make higher buildings. And then they need more electricity, more water, more sewage, more. And then all that should be implemented from taxpayers' money living maybe somewhere else. Now here we have unjust situation. For those people living far away who don't benefit from the street. Plus, we are changing Islam to suit a modern situation that was not caused by Islam. If we implemented Islam and the people had the right to revive lands, إحياء الأرض, I'll talk about it soon, the right of taking minerals, khayrat, from everywhere, the right to act without permission, لا ضرر ولا ضرار, then we will not have city centers like these. Why do we have to change Islam through ijtihad to suit a case that is originally wrong because we did not implement Islam? Next, please. Now I'll start the lecture. Now I'll explain. Okay? Bear with me, Mr. Chairman. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إن الحكم إلا لله يقص الحق وهو الفاصلين. This verse in Surah Al-An'am 57, it says that judgment for God, الحكم لله, يقص الحق. يقص means scissor, from scissoring. Next, please. I use this metaphor as حقوق that will run the society very well is given from God, and He cut it, subhanahu wa ta'ala, in pieces that if they were joined together, then we see how it works. If you go a tailor, maybe this is the pieces of the jacket. We cannot understand how they work. Unless we see them put together, we can understand that this is a jacket. Next, please. If you use the same metaphor, we can imagine that we can only understand حقوق, how it works these days, because God knows the future. When God created this universe, He knew what happens today. He knew that I'll give you this lecture today. Because He knew all this, He gave us a system that is, maybe I'll argue, and I prove that, alhamdulillah, in the book, Sharia tomorrow will be much better for us than today. Today it's much better than yesterday, and so on, till the Prophet's time. Yani in the future, Sharia will suit us more than how it was during the Prophet's day. During the Prophet's day, there was no high density population on earth. Resources were more sufficient. Now there is 8 billion. That's why I argue that Islam is for today much more suitable than if it was used during the Umayyad, Abbasid, and so on. Now let's take 2 examples of linking ahkam to understand how it works. We know from research that people's initiative toward the things that they own is very much linked to their position, whether they are users or owners or simply they control. The mayor of the Baladiyya, of the municipality, for example, he does not own, but he just controls. The person who has a farm and he's living in it as an owner, he will take much care of it, not like just a person working for him. So there is always a balance between the remoteness of those who own the property and their existence within it. There is another relationship that enhances the quality of objects in our societies based on the size of those who control. Yani a shop owned by 100 person, they will have difficulty controlling it and they may go to trouble and so on. So the shop fate will be in bad state. And that happened in some awqaf. If somebody raised the question of awqaf, I'll explain it. I don't mean awqaf is bad, no. Okay? Awqaf is one of the important institutions that solve people, Muslims' infrastructure needs and so on. And if you imagine that a person on 10 kilometers of palm trees, he cannot handle it well without helping others. So there is always a balance between the size of the people who own and the size of the properties. We cannot understand that without looking at the verses of Surah An-Nisa, next please, and preemption. Preemption means shufa. Preemption is the person's right to buy someone else's property if he decides to sell it. That's preemption. Now, why this is important? Because the stock of objects in our society now, whether it's computer, glasses, buildings, streets, museums, if this stock, rather than living 10 years, can live 20, 30 years, we save so much work from our life to live comfortably. We don't have to work hard to keep introducing new objects to live comfortably. Connecting these two, it's really amazing. And that's in the crisis in the built environment, in the book of crisis, in several chapters, mainly chapter 7. The ayahs of inheritance of Surah An-Nisa, divide, divide, divide. Preemption, connects, bring together. So throughout history, because when we think of them together, how they work together, I cannot explain that now, then we can understand how the jacket work. The sleeves with the body of the jacket and so on. Next. There are 7 hadith, 8 hadith of Shufa. Next, please. Now, in that example, I connected 2 issues. Now I'll try to connect 7 or 8 hadith, and it's quite important to economy. The currencies. Next, please. why the Prophet ﷺ did not issue the dinar or the dirham. If you notice in the previous picture, it has cross, it has a picture, and Islam does not prefer those and so on. But the Muslims accepted dealing with those dinars that has the cross, and they did not issue the dirham. Why? Did the Prophet ﷺ forgot? Of course not. Is it something good he had it from us? Of course not. There must be a deep wisdom, which is keeping away authorities from controlling economy. Next, please. To understand that, let me bring now the several hadith. The first is the Prophet ﷺ did not issue dinar or dirham. The second is the hadith of riba al-fadl. You know, usually has riba al-nasiya, riba al-fadl. Riba al-fadl, which is the Prophet ﷺ, next please, prohibited us from exchanging gold with gold if they are different in qualities. The same goes for silver, wheat, barley, dates, and in another hadith, salt is added. Next, please. Now, does it make sense if somebody has raw gold to exchange it with necklace or earring that has so much work on it? Of course not. The fuqaha, the ulama said, well, this exchange is prohibited so people can go to find out the value through silver, and there are so many discussions about that. My argument now here is that this will happen. People will exchange raw gold with dinar that is the maker of the dinar, the goldsmith, spent much time doing it. And although he will lose his effort to make the dinar, it's very strange, but inshallah it will be explained next. Now let's leave those two. The Prophet did not issue the dinar. The Prophet ﷺ prohibited us from riba al-fadl. And I'm making this connection to show you that we did not see how Islam works these days because we did not connect these ahkam. If we connect them, then we can see how they work together. Now let's take this hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, he who preceded other Muslims for a thing, it is his. Muslims are partners in three: water, grass, and fire. No hima is the protected area, except for God and his messenger. These hadith work together. I will not explain that now. They work together in a way that created a conviction, a deep-rooted convention among people's head, in their minds. Everybody knows this. Those who take minerals, gold, oil, whatever, it is theirs. It is not to the state. One madhab, and then the followers of the madhab changed their opinion. They all agree it is for the people who manage to possess it. Now we should expect people to go and extract gold. Next, please. I saw lately a documentary. I put the link here if you want to see it. A guy made a tour in Mauritania, and the government allowed the people there to extract gold. And you can see it's quite unsafe. All these wells, mines to extract gold next. And they are next, and then they are forced to sell it to the state. Next, please. Next, please. Now let's leave this aside. Another tradition by the Prophet ﷺ, when he came to Medina, he said, this is your market, do not make it narrower. لا تتحجروا لا ينتقص منه. And the tax will not be imposed on it. So this market that is defined by the Prophet ﷺ, it should not be built on it, it should be open, and no taxes should be levied on it. Next, please. examples of those markets, open markets. Next. There is another hadith, لا تتلقى الركبان, which is, to save time, just, it means agents. One cannot leave the city, the market, go outside the city, wait for those bringing goods and say, listen, if I take it from you, it's cheaper for you, it's good for you. Inside, you cannot sell it, they will cheat you, and so on. And he convinced that coming with the goods from outside another city, another mines, to buy it from him. The Prophet said, don't do that. لا تتلقى الركبان ولا يبيع حظ العباد. Thus, monopoly is eliminated. Why? Because those inside the town, or let's say a guy coming with olives, and the merchant inside the town knows olives very well. So he goes outside and he convinces the guy bringing olive, oh, your olive is not good, I can't buy it with higher price than the market, you save the trip, the trouble, I'll take it from you. So when he take it, he is more in a good position to monopolize olive. Next, please. Now, let's connect them together. Let's assume that I worked in gold mine with my friends. We managed to find some raw gold. What do we do? The first thing we head to the market. The Prophet said, لا تلقوا الركبان. There is no one to stop us. And if somebody tried through Amr Ma'ruf Nahy Munkar, they will stop him. Then he goes to the market. What does he find there? Maybe he'll find a person working with a goldsmith and he doesn't like him and he wants to quit the job. All he needs is 1 dinar. And he goes early to this market and wait for those coming with the gold, raw gold. And tell him, okay, give and take. Of course, the guy who was working in the goldsmith, trying now to become by himself a goldsmith. You say, okay, let's exchange. And he lost his effort of making the dinar. But he built a reputation. And he has a place in the market. Gold is gold. Maybe his gold is not as perfect as the others, but it goes by weight. Maybe somebody wants to make business, he has a small weight there so people can weigh. That's a business. Now, he takes the raw gold, make another dinar. The guy comes back again. He'll say, okay, I say, let's exchange. He said, no, this time with silver. But you see, I give you price, you can check, better than those who make dirham from silver. So he make little bit profit. And gradually 2 dinars and so on. If you think this way, we broke monopoly of gold. Now we can understand the wisdom of this importance. 7 hadith working together to break the monopoly of gold. We can only see this thing if we connect those hadith together. And the book of Qas Al-Haq is all connections of those hadith together. And it's amazing how Shari'a works these days. For more explanation, let me say the following. Hukuk can be classified into 3 types of relationships. Individuals with God, among the individuals, individuals with the state. Individual with the state, if Sharia is applied, means مقصوصة الحقوق. يقص الحق, all those حقوق together, if we use them in our life these days, they should have a name. The name is مقصوصة الحقوق. مقصوصة means already scissored by God, it was given to us. Now, what is important about this is that Next, please. If this مقصوصة الحقوق was tailored through ijtihad, it will be imbalanced. Now, unfortunately, to improve our sick societies, much attempt went to values, the relationship between God and individuals, and the relationship between individuals and individuals, but not relationship between individuals and the authorities, which is مقصوصة الحقوق. Those who defend Islam concentrate on issues such as Islamic finance, atheism, feminism, homosexuality, transgender, alcoholism. Are you Ash'ari or Maturidi? Plus most teachings of Islam like importance of dhikr, dua. I'm not saying that these are not important. They are very important. But that doesn't mean we ignore, which has happened so far, the relationship between the people and the state, which is حقوق. For example, in a series of 13 episodes of a famous educator, all he does is inject youth with values. Thus, if at most he managed to convince 100,000 persons per year to become good Muslims, the society that does not rule with حقوق might produce more than 10 million ignorant of Islamic values. Next, please. Now, what is the difference between values and حقوق? Next, please. Values is basically things that are based on wishes. I wish that you take care of your parents. I wish that you be nice with your neighbors. I wish that you make sadaqah. I wish that you make qiyam layl. Wishes. It's asked from the people to do it. But how they do it, whether they did it or no, we don't know exactly. Whether he in himself inside he's Maturidi or Ash'ari, whether he believes in the oneness of God or we don't know that. Maybe, but not as حقوق. حقوق, I use the word حركيات in the book to distinguish حركيات from آليات. آليات, mechanisms in English. There is no word for حقوق, for حركيات. حركيات means the things in Sharia that push the people to act, like land revivification. People need lands to live, to have a house. People need lands to have, to build factories. Land is important. So if the Sharia said, he who revived land is his, we should expect the people to move to take it. The same with minerals, the same with one can act without the permission of the state. I'll explain that now. So the distinction between both is largely depends on whether the people may do it or they will jump to do it. Next, please. Of course, there is other differences, but this is the main one. Now, مقصوصة الحقوق is much related to the basic human tendencies. People like to avoid interventions by others. People like to improve their properties. People like to uh, inject their values in their own properties, and so on. Those basic human tendencies are shared between Muslims and non-Muslims. It is common. Yani when you see a child fighting another child over a toy, who taught him to do that? No, it is an innate. It is basic human innate. Next, please. So, حقوق, if implemented, will lead to diverse environmental, economic, political solutions. I'll explain this now. On the contrary, if scientists or politicians introduce new theories or solutions, the system of rights, حقوق, will be imbalanced. Let me give you some examples. If the state said, I will widen this street, what happens? Some people lost their rights. If the state said, we will increase the tax by 10%, what happened? Some people got benefit over others. So any intervention, any solution we can think of will lead to changing the hukuk system, disbalance, which accumulate, as we'll see inshallah, and leads to catastrophe. At the same time, hukuk itself give you different solution that suits different sides. Next, please. Now, jump this. Next, please. Let me give you an example of one type of hukuk. Next. In the Islamic Sharia, the dead end street is owned by the people around it. The people living around it own it. Now, let's say that there is two dead end street, one owned by Muslims, one owned by non-Muslims. This example to show you that Islam is good for even for non-Muslims. That's why I started the session by giving you examples of pollution, climate change, that if non-Muslims know about it, they may accept it. And even sometimes I believe they may run with it. So, and if we have two dead end streets, one for Muslims, one for non-Muslims, the Muslims may pray in it and make tarawih. The non-Muslims may drink in it, they may dance in it. Now we have two different functions, values for the same space. But what are the consequences? Because the people living in the street, they have to maintain it. If a batting bulb damaged, they have to fix it. They have to take care of the cable in the street. They have to clean the street. They have to maintain the street and everything. That will bring them together socially. That will, and that's important economically, make them look for higher quality objects to be installed in their spaces with lower price. Now, in this case, we should expect China not to produce low quality cables because it will not be sold. Because if we think like this, the people has control for the spaces that they own, and the dead end street is their ownership. Now, I'm sure somebody asked, how about thorough streets? How about highways? I'll answer to that if you ask. Because the demand for those cables are less, China will not produce them. But if the street is controlled by the government, by the Baladiyya, lighting the street, just an example, will be the task of the government. A corrupted official may go and buy low quality cable. Next, please. I was passing in Asila, Morocco, and I saw this entrance. It was not that clean outside, but when I went inside, oh my God, it is a living room. The end space became a living room. Next, please. People enjoy themselves in it. People take care of it. This is an example of Izmir where the people lost control because the government took control of this dead end street. So there was a cafe here, and the guy paid money to the municipality to use this space, to extend the space of the cafe to the outside, to cover this in winter. The street became narrower. The people cannot object. They lost control. Even a guy in the back there transformed his house to toilets for the passers-by. And the smell would annoy the neighbors. They cannot do anything. They lost control. Next. So if residents are owners of dead-end spaces, then regardless of their religion or culture, certain consequences will emerge, such as higher quality street lamps, diverse alternatives. Next. Now, the way the Muslim city is structured, because they implemented Qas Al-Haq in most periods of time, one can argue that there is a house controlled by the people living in it, another house, third house. Those houses share a space, tariq, street, small open area. Those together control with others of the same level a space, saha, maybe a large forecourt. Those together control a rahba or square. Those together become one unit. So units create another units, and there is word for in Arabic language doesn't is not much used now. It's called khitat. Khitta means an area or a zone that is controlled and owned by the people living in it. Now, I said in the beginning that the state doesn't have much role, and that then there'll be a vacuum, and that vacuum is filled by hukuk. Among those issues that I'm raising to convince you, there is three types of khitat. This is khitat makaniya, or we may say locational khitat. I don't know what's the translation. Makan is place. Place, territorial structure, or territorial structure. In the English book, I said territorial structure and explained that it is different in Islam. So this one type of khitat where people live. There is another type of khitat, if there is time, I'll explain, maybe not, called production khitat, which is khitat intajiyya. People, maybe somebody living in Damascus has a program connecting with someone else living in Mauritania to exchange ideas about application with someone else to make a computer in Jeddah and so on. People in different locations, they work together and they make khitat. There is third type of khitat that I will also not explain, which is loyalty khitat. Loyalty khitat means people usually in communities like this or in khitat intajiyya, they follow someone. People always like someone. They like these days football teams. They like singers. They may like imam of mosque and so on. These khitat, imam of a masjid, imam of Jum'ah masjid, imam of a city. This system of khitat brings أهل الحل والعقد. Sorry, I cannot explain that, but just keep in mind that these three types of khitat always make the ummah very powerful because decisions are in the hands, whether it is in terms of production, whether in terms of living necessities, or whether in passing away loyalty, is always in the hands of the people. Next, please. Therefore, we should expect, if what I said is true, we find gates to the khitat. Gate means a place, a sharp line between inside, outside, between mine and yours, between change your behavior when you come inside. It means control. So here you can see a gate, Marrakesh. Here another gate in another town, Tunis. Next, please. I think Tunis. Next. And here you can see a gate of a quarter. Here you see the wooden beam that will hold the gate. Next, please. I went to Tunis, I found them there. They are very clear. The authorities demolished them to control the people. Next. And you can see it here. Here, next. Some of them do exist, like this one. Marrakesh, Tunis. Next. Now, in the beginning, I said, how do you get rid of pollution and climate change and so on? To do that, we should not have poor people flock to work much. Now, if you think of any business these days, whether you want to have a factory, a farm, shop, you need three things: resources, land, machines, and so on, permission from the state, and knowledge. These days, with capitalism, you can get them all with money. In Islam, it's totally different. It's in the hands of those who work. You can take it. Therefore, we should not expect at all in the Muslim society a person who doesn't have a job, unless he is handicapped. Next, or crazy مجنون. I'll explain now just briefly, Mr. Chairman. I know I took much time, but just give me 5-10 minutes. I'll stop. These days, there is one type of ownership. A party owns either a government, a company, a child. In Islam, there is two types of ownership. Private ownership. Now they call it public ownership, but it's in fact one type of ownership. Someone owns. And land that is not owned. For those who can take for them. Imagine air. I can take air freely. I can breathe air freely because it's not owned. The same with land. Next. I made the statistics. They say land is scarce, it will finish, and so on. I made the statistics. If people live on the continent's peripheries with a depth of 4 kilometers, the 8 billion people are sufficient to live. Each family has 883 square meter, and the whole continent from inside is empty. Then why they control land? Next. They say it will become chaotic if we don't control land. My argument is the more sources are not controlled within hukuk, the less consumptions are. Next. So they divide lands like this, as you know. They sell them. Next. The rich can buy them. The poor will have squatter settlements. I can see the contrast because there is stratification. Next. Can we have settlements without governmental intervention and bureaucracy? Now, of course, you have a lot of questions in your mind. Now I'll answer one question, a difficult question, which is land distribution. Next. Can we do it without bureaucracy? The answer is yes. The ladies do not bring birth at once. It's gradual. So the people go into the market to take land to live in is gradual. So this is exercise for a stage where people revive land, because in Islam, mawat means dead land. It becomes alive if people revive it, so it becomes alive, then they own it. People cannot own lands without revivification. People cannot say, I inherited this land from my parents. No, this thing does not exist. Even the lands given as allotment from Khalifa, from the Prophet ﷺ, is a permission to act on that land before others, but it's not ownership. Does not lead to ownership. So if people revive lands like this is one land, 1, 2, 3, mean timing. One means came earlier, 2 after. Then they have their path to water well or something. Gradually, roads will emerge. So the people walking in the site are the one to decide through experience. Day and night, it's sunny, it's hot, it's cold. They decide the direction and the location of the street. I walk this way, someone walk that way, a third guy like this way. So as if they are voting to the location of the street, gradually over time, stage 1, 5 years later, this will happen, 10, this will happen next. Gradually, the people demarcate the path that, next please. These are demarcated paths that will become roads. Next, please. Here you see demarcated path that is not well defined. Next. Through usage, we will move from ill-defined pathways to a very well-defined streets, roads. Next. So here we managed to establish streets without authorities, without intervention. Next. And of course, when people revive, they revive nodes for them to play. Next, to sit. So they establish their rights. Next. Here you see the type of usage, establish the right. Next. I saw a village these days, people revived land. In the past, when they revived, it was narrow streets because they used mules, kettles, and so on. These days, they use cars. You see how wide the street is. It is 80 meters. Next. It's for the people advantage to do that. Here, a street between two, there's mountain here, mountain here. See how the streets are tailored in a way that it would be very difficult to, I can't say artificial intelligence cannot do it these days. Maybe they can do it. But the daily use of the people make decisions accumulate. Next, accretions of decisions. Now, how can you do something like this? This is from Turkey. Look how almost perfect with the slope of the mountain, this organization of the properties between inside and outside. Next. This same argument that I talked about for streets applies for farms and so on. Next. Now, I said we need three things: resources, permissions, knowledge. Next, I talked about resources, and I took the land as an example. Now, regarding permission, I said, remember that to act, to be employed, to own things, you should have resources, permissions, knowledge. And these can be grasped if we if we rule by Sharia. Here we have the hadith of the Prophet, لا ضرر ولا ضرار. I will finish soon. لا ضرر ولا ضرار, which means neither dirar nor darar. There should be neither harming nor reciprocating harm. Which means the person can act without permission from the state. If he causes damage, the people has the right around him to stop him. In this case, he will be very careful if you want to build a factory, not to damage the others. Some say, Jamil, but somebody will damage others because he's powerful. We are thinking within a capitalist system that makes some people powerful, some not. But if we implement Islam, those powerful people will not exist because the resources of power are two: position in the government or finance, money, too much money. These two don't exist because with opening doors of empowerment for all people, people will, to large extent, will be close to each other in their income. Yani, someone may make 10 times the other, but not 1 milliard times like these days. Next. So here you see, I think, yeah, it's 1 hour. I'll stop here. And if you please move the slides one by one. Yeah. So people, slow. So people, if they like, can go to them. Let me just give you the back because this is important. Back, one more, back. Okay, this one. You have seen what happened in Dubai these days with water, with rain. Catastrophe, right? How much it would cost them now to make that? Usually, if they want to make a drainage, water falls from rainwater goes these days because we have a nation state from the house to the street, from the street to another major street, then to the sea or whatever. Next, I'll go very fast. Next, and look back. Yeah, slowly. You see how much does it cost? Can we save this cost? Next. You see what happened when it rained? Next. This is Dubai, by the way. In the Muslim city, because there is the right of حق مسير الماء, the right of discharge rainwater, back. One by one. The water, back, please, back. Move when I tell you, please. Okay, next. The water discharges from this roof to this roof. Next. Then from this roof to this roof to that. Next. So the thing that they think is a problem, which the rain is diffused into smaller channels that are manageable to be cleaned, maintained. Then it goes from here to there to the channel. Next. A town made of mud in Morocco which dissolves very fast with the rainwater. Look what they did. Next. Next. This is interesting. The right of water servitude. حق مسير الماء. A guy, the neighbor, revived a land. The guy who came later has to deal with the discharge of rainwater inside his house. So the water goes like this. He has to take care of it, clean it. Next. Here, how he clean it. Next. Then through gravity, it goes from house to house. Next. So Sharia, through حق المسيل, the right of discharging rainwater, with the gravity, push water to the valleys, to the sea. Next. Reminder, this important reminder, this is not small is beautiful. It is different argument. Those who know the book of Schumacher, Small is Beautiful. Next. Now you can go graduate. Let's move a few more slides. Okay. About Malthus. Next. Now, freeze this. Hukuk leads to a society with a maximum percentage of owners. This is an important diagram. These circles, owners who own property, and this is the business that they do. In our contemporary days with capitalism, businesses are made by those who own, in which those circles, people who don't have capital, work for them. Next. We have pollution. Next. Flogging people to work hard. Next. If we give me time, I'll explain this. Necessities needed and complementary. Next. But I will not go to it. Now, this is what I want. Now you can go through different slides slowly that compares those guys who see this session later. I have two diagrams. This one has finished. Just 2 minutes. Now back. Next. Yeah, this one. This dotted line means that there is no borders at all between regions. Solid line means nation state. These circles means people have wealth and they can participate to make businesses, or they will do it alone. This means a state or a billionaire or a corporation that hires poor people to work for them. Next. Now you can go through them slowly while we discuss it. If people are interested, they can read it later. I put these two diagrams and I'll give you some description of what will happen comparing both. Thank you.
Barakallah fikum, Ustad Jamil. This has really been a very sort of lengthy and detailed treatment of course, summarizing a work which is itself nearly 2,000 pages. So it's not really possible to do justice to the work that you've written. But I trust that this is, as someone who's not familiar with the work yet, but have had my interest considerably piqued, I trust this is a sort of a good summary or overview of some of the main themes and arguments that you're making in this book. And so in that spirit, I want to invite first I want to thank you on behalf of Ummatics for bringing this really kind of kaleidoscopic perspective of the climate crisis, of Islam, of contemporary neoliberalism, global geographic questions and challenges, and bringing the Quran to speak very directly to these challenges and provide an alternative to the way in which we think of the contemporary civilization and the Islamic sort of possibilities at this point. I think to call it an alternative is ambitious, and we should be ambitious, but I think in many respects this will be the sort of discussion that we have in the following I guess 40 minutes that we have, And I would like to invite sort of participants to put in their questions. We will try to do what we can to address as many of the questions as possible. Your questions, particularly in the YouTube chat, come up in our sort of side panel, so we'll be reading out any questions there and addressing them to Dr. Jamil. But first, if you'll allow me, I'll ask some questions of my own. So once again, thank you very much for this very rich presentation. You didn't necessarily sort of very explicitly reference your book or pages of your book or sections of your book. So I think it might be just a useful, you can do this in brief, a useful sort of informative comment to kind of tell us how this presentation in particular speaks to your trilogy, your 3-volume sort of Qas Al-Haq in Arabic, and also for the information of sort of attendees who know only English. Is there anything available in English as of yet, or would you encourage sort of potential students of your work to perhaps explore translating it, or perhaps explore studying it in higher education, whether at master's level or at doctoral level? So perhaps I can start with that question, inshallah.
Thank you for hosting me. And regarding the second question, which is the translation, I made a contract with a publisher who started translating the book into languages: Turkish, English, French, Spanish is coming.
Sure.
Regarding the English, they translated 1 volume out of the 3, and maybe it takes 4 or 5 months, hopefully. They're working hard on it, inshallah.
Sure.
The French also the same, they finished 1 volume. The Turkish 2 volumes. Inshallah, it will be soon.
Inshallah.
So it is a copyright of him for a few years, then it will be in a paper format, then it will be available. Yeah. Of course, he has to make profit, cover the expenses.
Of course.
Then it will be available in the net. That's my agreement, because all the writings I do don't have copyright. So you can feel free and take from the videos or my Arabic book and translate whatever you like, not as a book, as sections. And maybe if somebody interested can translate the videos, 187 episodes. It's easier these days to English, French, whatever. I won't say no. They can do it without contacting me even. Yeah, it is sabil. Yeah.
Jazakumullah khair. Akramakum
Well,
Allah.
inshallah.
And
So
if
anybody can cut anything, do anything, as long as he's making references to the
right.
to the
So, and where would these 187 videos be? Are they
in YouTube.
on your YouTube channel?
In YouTube, if they write in Arabic Qas Al-Haq, it is available there.
Excellent.
Regarding your first question about the referencing, I didn't say anything about Qas Al-Haq.
Okay. So
Nothing. I just, what I'm trying to say, guys, going that way, I say, guys, that's the way. That's all.
okay.
You'll have hundreds of questions in your head. That's why it is over 1,700 pages, just to cover the questions that they may come. But the larger picture that I didn't talk about, which is the خطط مكانية, اقتصادية, and ولائية, and how the أحكام work together. Here I have a point that I forgot to mention, that
Sure.
for you Ummatics.
Sure.
And Ummatics cannot be formed with this method of advising people, hoping when the people know their rights, they will jump and take it. A good example, you see the young guys throwing themselves in danger to pass oceans, seas, to go to Europe from Africa.
Right.
Don't you think these guys will cross the borders between countries to smuggle goods? They say smuggle. No, that's their right to cross borders. Don't you think that they will do it if they knew that that's their right?
Right.
Do you think somebody will not dig a water well to create a farm if he knows that is his right? And وَمَنْ قُتِلَ دُونَ مَالِهِ فَهُوَ شَهِيدٌ.
No.
They will act But the ulama of the Sultan told us, you have to obey the ruler. You cannot do this because you have to respect the borders, you have to do this, you have to do that. And that makes the younger people in Ummah passive. When they know their rights, they will move. Then we should expect the Ummah to be created. I have video of that video 18,
Right.
episode 18.
I mean, in some respects, the entire project of Ummatics, like the comment you just put forward, is a subversive project. It wants to subvert the current status quo fundamentally. And I think, as you've suggested again in your presentation, there's a combination of actors, whether it's those who have political power who are able to monopolize a certain type of power in our own context, who are working in cahoots with the neoliberal elite, the people making the hundreds, thousands, in some cases perhaps million times salaries of the people who are in the sweatshops manufacturing the goods that these people are dictating upon third world countries sitting in their mansions in, I don't know, San Francisco. And so with that sort of
There is question here, very important, from
okay,
Ahmed. Isn't that socialism? This
okay,
is important question. With
please.
socialism, the government take all the resources and redistribute the resources.
Right,
With Sharia, the people take the resources and arrange their life. Now, somebody will ask how that could happen.
right,
Providing services can come from two types. From awqaf, we know what awqaf did in the Muslim world,
right,
but lately it was misused in the last century, and through businesses. Think of your Vodafone service or internet service. It is by companies.
right,
The best highways are made by companies. Airplanes are made by companies. Services, all universities, hospitals, all will be made by companies.
right,
Companies, companies that are composed of the people who have much wealth. Now we
right,
are thinking in a situation where the people are poor. That's why when we see housing by people when they revive lands, it's in bad state. And the judgment is that uh, revivification is bad. No, those people are poor. But if there is no bureaucracy and there is no this class of people who have everything,
right,
that wealth will be distributed among members of the Ummah depending on their initiative. So there is very much difference, and that issue I explored again and again to bring the people's attention with different methods. Islam is not socialism; it's totally different. In
so
Islam, in Islam, percentage of ownership will reach 100% almost. With capitalism, 65, 60%. With socialism, almost zero. Most people in socialist system, they use, but they don't own or control. Some of them control.
let me sort of maybe ask a clarificatory question on the notion of percentage ownership being at the level of 100%. So you already mentioned that there are certain things which are not eligible for ownership, such as land. Land is a function of utility and is kind of owned by the Ummah as a whole. Is that? I wanted to actually ask a clarification because you said the Muslim can own property, but land is something from Ihya al-Mawat, as you indicated, can be passed on according to usage. Is that fair? Was
No,
that
no, no,
is
no.
that a misunderstanding of the?
Yeah, yeah, no, 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 no.
Right.
Can you breathe air now?
Yes,
Who
of
owns the
course.
air?
It's public good.
When you take it, it's yours.
Right.
The same with the lands. The society, the government, the Khalifa, their task is to defend it, but they don't own it. It's available for those who can take it. How can they take it? How can they own it? If they revive it, they become the owners. If they don't revive it, they are not the owners. Then the ulama went to whole discussion about what is revivification. Is it a ceiling? Is it a farm? Is it what is it? And that is detailed
Right.
in the book.
Right.
So this means that anybody acts will own. and then he can sell it, then he can, but he has to exert work. And this push everybody to work, to own. But that, and this lead to a society where the land value almost a minimal. When you buy a land now these days, you buy its location, you buy that it is scarce, and you buy its rights.
Right.
Its rights, how many floors you can go, whether commercial, residential. So the price depends on these three.
Right.
With Islam, there is no land value unless it becomes strategic. And there is another harakiyat mechanism that fight making lands in strategic position. And because you can always change the function, if you don't damage others, that brings the land value almost to zero. So land is not a major obstacle for any business. Now, if you exclude the virtual businesses like applications of computers and so on, you always need a land for a factory, for a pharmacy, for a shop, and that's the first obstacle to become an owner.
Right.
In socialism, you cannot have it without the permission of the state. With
Right.
Islam, it's yours.
So let me sort of again drill down into a detail here, which is, I think a lot of what you're talking about, it sounds really sort of amazing if we could bring it into reality, but it's very far from reality. And right now, for example, as you will know very well, there is a major housing crisis in most advanced economies that I'm aware of. There are pockets, cities like Vienna, which is actually quite influenced by socialism because of a particular history, or Singapore, where the government owns a large amount of land usage or something along those lines. How is it that how would Islam manifest? I'm sure you must talk about NIMBYism, for example, the tendency of groups of people once they've established a certain sort of community that they will fight tooth and nail to prevent further development in their areas, particularly low cost, affordable housing and things like this. A major problem in the United States and much of Europe. And I wonder how Islam would address that sort of a concern differently. One of the major sort of choke points of contemporary community development in the West.
Okay, let's take housing as a problem, as a crisis. You know that there is squatter settlements. They call it in Latin America favelas. They call it in Turkey
Yes.
kujabunta. They call it squatter settlements, which is basically
Ashwa'i.
people, ashwaiyat, which is basically people taking land, living overnight, and so on.
Right.
And there is a guy who wrote a book about that, John F. Turner. He noticed that in Latin America, when the people, before election, were given the promise by those who would be elected to recognize their ownership, they will elect him, they will vote for him. Now, when he is elected, he will give them the right to own. He'll give them the taboos, the deeds, that you are the owner.
Right.
Immediately, within few months, the area will change. The people will invest in that properties, and it moves from being terrible site to a good site. Now, if the people in Singapore cannot move out of Singapore because there is a border, do we say we cannot use Islam in our Muslim world? Like in Algeria, Jordan, vast areas,
Right.
even Bangladesh. In China, you can travel 4 hours, 6 hours by train, you don't see any person. It is desert. With new technology, they can redevelop those desert areas. So the land is it's over everywhere. But what makes the people work in cities? Commuting. Because the government has all the resources. That's why I put the three verses in the beginning, Ayat al-Fay. Al-Fay means the money that came from ما أفاء على رسوله من أهل القرى that came from the people's work, resources such as oil and so on, gold, it's fay. It is within the hands of the state. But if the people are allowed to spread, God with his wisdom created a land in which in 100 square meter there is phosphate, and there is 100, 200 square meter there is olive trees. There is one thing I could not explain, which is very, very, very interesting.
Right.
In zakah, this is two harakiyat. In zakah, it should be given as objects, ayan, not cash. And it should be given to the nearer and the nearer. If you have a site here that has olive trees, so much olive trees, and they're giving their zakah as olives, you are not allowed to move it. It should be given to the nearer.
Yes, yes.
And because its object, let's say cows or camels, it's difficult to move.
Right.
Let's say parts of airplanes, it is difficult to move. The people on the other side that is saturated with working hands, that side does not have the resources to feed those people with the amwal ibn sabil that's mentioned 8 times in the Quran, to move people around, to move knowledge around, to move commodities around.
Right.
People will move from this side to this side that has olives, because olive will be given to the nearer and then the nearer. So this cell that have olive now is recovering because the people there next year become zakah giver. Gradually, the people will move. So this congestion of the cities will not occur. This is out of capitalism. Now, if we read our contemporary product of
Right.
capitalism to judge Islam, I think this is يعني philosophical position needs to be rethought.
Right. Barakallah fikum. I mean, there are so many rich threads to explore here, and I am conscious that I should not abuse my chair's position to ask all the questions, so I will turn to some of the questions that are coming in. And to be honest, we've had a very rich set of questions. Someone's asking, this you've already kind of alluded to, is the Sheikh's work available in the English language? And you're saying that, as you mentioned, it's currently in the process of translation, but you also encouraged people, if they would like to translate your videos, that you should, they can do so. There's you don't place a copyright on anything that you release, but of course, in order to get your book translation into those languages is copyrighted for a period. Inshallah, we look forward. I hope that more intellectuals do this and make their work accessible in the way you have. So someone is asking. I can't really read their name very well, but it says, what is your stance on the current education system, including in the Muslim world? Is it in some sense dumbing down the ummah?
Yes, of course.
Right.
Education is a tool by the authorities to create coward people who don't think.
Right.
Education was not like that at all. Depended on awqaf. And the awqaf is financed by the people. If you open the door in resources,
Right.
permissions, knowledge for the people, and they become all rich to a large extent, they will donate to institutions that will teach their kids. In that case, those institutions are free from control from authorities. The whole picture will change. Everything will change.
Right. Sticking with government, a couple of people have asked about the question of government, because the nation state is perhaps the most important institution in our time, and or the most sort of like difficult to dislodge, causing a number of issues that we're trying to address. So someone asked, can an Islamically enlightened modern government of a nation state, for example, Malaysia or even Afghanistan is mentioned here, implement these sorts of ideas, or does the nation state itself need to be abolished? And someone else asked, I want to connect the two, if the government won't have a say, does this mean there won't be any more urban planning? And I think you've kind of answered this already, but just for you to respond.
Yeah, let's assume that we, in the Muslim world anywhere, we had the best government system, like let's say Scandinavian countries.
Right.
Okay, everything is transparent and so on.
Yeah.
Good government, very elected. What's the result? We will have societies will pollute the built environment. Climate change.
Under the current system.
Yes.
Under the current system. Right.
No matter how clean it is, no matter how super it is. That's why I said مقصوصة الحقوق. It is a system that if it's changed, unfortunately, many slides, if people go back and read the slides, they'll find some slides explaining that the minute you think outside of مقصوصة الحقوق, there is this balance of justice. You can always make ijtihad in anything,
right,
except حقوق. Why? If I say that your property is 2-story, you cannot go higher, I took away from your rights. only rights given by God that work together lead global Earth to a situation that it will not pollute. Otherwise, pollution is our fate.
This
Now,
is
some may say this is a religious position because I'm going to Quran and Hadith. In the book, I make the argument with non-Muslims. Forget Islam, keep it aside. That's why I started in the beginning. Imagine a society without unemployed people. You cannot flog them to work harder, so production will come down. And that doesn't mean that we live with lowest quality things or less things. I didn't have a chance to explain that.
right.
In fact, to the contrary, we live much higher quality life with more materials, yet without polluting the built environment.
Is this so? I mean, the critique here is of neoliberal capitalism and consumerism, consumption on a scale which is completely unsustainable. I've heard you say in other settings that the Scandinavian model is, it consumes more, right? I mean, they would need multiple Earths, and you have the very ironic situation of Norway, which is, I think, the highest in the Human Development Index, or one of the top, and its entire premise is hydrocarbons. I wanted to ask, are you saying that is what you're advocating similar to degrowth
Oh, no,
of
no, no, no. The
okay,
more humans,
right,
the more prosperous the earth will be.
okay,
Because there'll be more inventions, more products without polluting.
right,
Because factories always will not pollute, and there will be always recycling. Yeah, that's another subject. So it is not decreasing growth, either population or products.
right. So again, I'm going to come to a question which has come in the chat. Someone is asking, what is your view on fiat monetary system, the fiat monetary system that is
I
controlled
see.
by the state, and do you think that liberating money from the control of the state can lead to a fall of the state and the revival of the people?
Well, there is a whole chapter for this because it's a very important issue. Chapter called Al-Fasl al-Wasat, a whole chapter on this, which is uh, now when you deal with coins, gold, silver, what is everything, the value is in it. So when it moves from hand to hand, the value is going from hand to hand. But when the state keeps uh, issuing banknotes, currencies, and so on, as we all know in economy, there is always inflation. But that's not as important as creating so much virtual money, maybe I think 19, 18 times or what more than what's existing in terms of objects, that is manipulated through fortunes, through future sales, and so on and so forth. There is a whole chapter about that, how Islam currency has a job, exchanging goods. The minute it goes out of this job, of this function, it is become a tool for manipulation. And that will create stratification, that creates poorer people, that leads to flogging those poorer people for more production in sites that pollute.
SubhanAllah. Um, uh, Once again, I mean, there's so much to process here, but
I know
unfortunately,
it's very difficult in the beginning to accept. I usually had very difficult. This book was published in 2014. Lately,
subhanAllah.
in the last few months, it started to, in the last 2 years, but gradually, in the last 2 months, people start to talk about it. Why? Because people immediately reject the ideas. But
Right,
through discussion with them, I'll say, okay, challenge me, give me a situation where Sharia does not work.
right, right.
When I respond, gradually, they accept the
I hope. I mean, I think this is the sort of, considering the size of the book and the ambition of it. I think we're going to have a lot of discussions, and I look forward to either in Ummatics or in a separate setting that we're able to have this conversation further. I'm going to go back to the questions because there are so many of them that. So someone is asking about cryptocurrencies. Do you have any thoughts on cryptocurrencies as a way of diffusing
yes, yes, yes.
monetary power from
Yeah,
the state?
currency has functions. Uh, يعني I have nothing against Bitcoins. I think it is perfect. It has two problems. First, it could be solved easily that it is always available if there is electricity. If there is no electricity, you cannot use it to exchange it. But its major problem that it is limited in size. It has certain number of, it's divided.
Right.
And one day it will finish. Okay? That number of bitcoins will not increase.
Yeah.
Now imagine a situation where the gold in the world or gold is supplied, supported by other minerals, like platinum, so it will not finish. So imagine what happens. The price of bitcoins will shoot, and you can see that the first bitcoin was much cheaper than today. It's going up, 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 up. If we depend as societies on bitcoins, the price goes up, 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 up. And this will create a market for Bitcoin exchange. So certain number of people are benefiting without working. In Islam, that will never happen. You have to work to make money. Either you inherit it or you take it as a gift from others. In both cases, inheritance, gift, other people worked on it to create it. Or you work to create wealth.
So rents, you think, are in many respects very frowned upon to depend on rents through this sort of commodity.
Now, let's say renting a house, right?
Right. That's a bit different, yeah.
This is a very good example. If you have an apartment building, if you have an apartment building in New York, you don't have to work your life, all your life, right?
Right. Right.
But why this happened? Because people are not allowed to revive land somewhere else. Because monetary system is controlled and all the markets are there and so on and so forth. But if people has the chance to do other jobs and monetary system is not controlled by the state, and you can have lands, the rent value will go down. There'll be always rent. We cannot, but the rent value will go down. Does it make sense to build to rent? Why? Because remember, when you sell a property, if we implemented Islam, you are not selling the land by itself. You're selling mostly what's on the land in terms of effort.
Right.
So in that case, Ahmed bin Hanbal, he was living on renting a house.
Right.
In Baghdad.
Yeah.
But Baghdad was, I don't say like these days, no. The authority in Baghdad controlled to a large extent finance. Because there was gradually from the Umayyad Empire, Caliphate, Sharia gradually changed in Hukuk. It started just before the Umayyad Empire. Al-Hajjaj, for example, he used to take jizya from Christians. When they became Muslim, some of them were stopped from becoming Muslim because this refund, this venue of income will be stopped.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, so I mean, I'm just a bit conscious of time as well because we usually have a 2-hour cutoff, and I'll see what my colleagues say that how long we can extend. I mean, it's really this point that you're making. Is this a critique of, because you've depended a great deal on the concepts within our fiqh tradition, but you're critiquing, this sort of act of Hajjaj, which is actually largely rejected by the fiqh tradition. Overwhelmingly, they will say that this is, a sign of the Umayyads' corruption. So the fact that Ahmad ibn Hanbal lives in a place like Baghdad and he's ends up working at the mercy to a certain extent of the state there, that's not necessarily codified. I assume it's critiqued in fiqh works if something like this is happening. It's not necessarily codified as normative. Is that a view that you would hold, or?
No. The Abbasids, when they started, now what happened in the Muslim world, each dynasty comes, they say, we will implement Islam. The ones before did not.
Right.
I have a diagram in the crisis in the Amarat al-Ard, a circle where each dynasty, gradually they deviate from Islam. Then there is a revolution on them. The next dynasty starts from the center. gradually they deviate.
Right. Right.
Ahmed ibn Hanbal lived in a time, you know, Muhammad خلق Quran and so on.
Right.
Just 1 minute.
So just the admin is saying that after, if you give permission, we'll open up the possibility of another session of Q&A so that we can finish today on time in about 10 minutes. But it would be wonderful to have you back to sort of
Yes, we can arrange for that. Let's see.
like that.
Let's see. But I have one request. Yani, if people
Yes.
can read a little bit and have
Right.
familiarity with that,
Right.
so I don't have to explain the basics.
Right.
Then
Right.
the discussion will be fruitful. Now I'm always going to the basics,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But one important basic
Mm-hmm.
we should pay attention to.
Right.
Most of us, thinkers, researchers, philosophers, much influenced by the Western uh,
Paradigms.
thoughts,
Yeah.
paradigms. Either we are thinking revolving within it or against it.
Yeah. Yeah.
My position, we should start from reality. We
Mm.
see how Hadith and Quran works these days in our reality.
Right.
We shouldn't, it's good to look at history,
Right.
but history is the product of people sometimes did not implement Islam. When we understand those Hadith and tradition, how can they work these days, then we can open up subject for philosophy, for history, and so on. And that's why I always find it difficult to convince those who are much interested in philosophy.
Right.
Although I teach epistemology,
MashaAllah.
Karpa Portambascon, Emeralaktosh, that's I teach that. And I tried in this presentation to be very bold,
Right.
conjectures and repetition.
Right.
I be very bold, so to staffiz you, to make you
Provoke.
anxious, to provoke you, the word, to provoke you to come up with questions.
No.
But unfortunately, I made a mistake by assessing the time.
Khairan,
I
inshallah.
spoke too much and we lost time. But it's impossible to.
Jazakumullah khair. What I would do is encourage people to, and myself, of course, because I haven't read the book yet, but Ummatics has shared on the YouTube chat your website, and inshallah, we can get a lot of those access to a lot of material there. I assume most of it is in Arabic, so there's going to be a task of trying to access in the case of some people. I wanted to continue with some of these questions. There are actually a rich vein of questions, some of which I think deserve a lecture of their own in a sense. But so here's a brief question: what's the Sheikh's view on the World Economic Forum? And so that's
It is a tool to eternalize the capitalist system.
right,
It is a tool to make poorer
yeah,
people poor.
right,
It is a deviation.
right,
And we will fool you.
right. And I'm not an expert on these sorts of things, but things like the World Trade Organization or the Transatlantic Partnership, I think.
The World Trade Organization forced countries
Yeah,
to move goods, but
right,
not people.
right, right.
Person, India cannot migrate to, let's say, another country.
The-
Okay.
yes,
Why you allow goods
yes,
under our conditions
right,
to move? And can you imagine
right,
they export onions to Africa?
yes. There's something remarkably perverse about the global system, which we all take for granted. I mean, the power of ideology is really extraordinary. So, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. There was another question which,
There is a question, where is the book of Qas Al-Haq? All the books are in the net. You
okay,
just write them, you can download them with very high quality from Dropbox, from ResearchGate, Academia, Edu. They're all there. If you
excellent.
go to my page on Twitter or Facebook, you'll find the sites, the links for all the
So,
books.
I mean, it's perhaps worth, people who are very interested but don't have access to Arabic, you can try and perhaps you get together with someone who does know Arabic and try and find the opportunity to read through sections of it with them. So, what's your stance? This is another question. What's your stance on the building of houses that outlive their occupants? So, I mean, which is the conventional way in the West.
What do you mean? Read it?
So I think how I read this is, I mean, most housing economies in the world will have houses which will outlive their occupants. So I live in a house, for example, which was built in the 1920s. In Japan, most houses are rebuilt over time. So people will sort of like always be building new houses. The housing stock is constantly replenished. Whereas in a place like the UK, most of our housing stock is extremely old and people are doing some repairs to it. So this sort of housing stock is kind of designed, or it has kind of become come into a position where when you buy a house, you're not buying it just for yourself. This is definitely going to be inherited by someone else or sold on, etc. It's
So
going to last
what's the
years.
question?
So, do you think that there's a problem for houses, if I've understood this correctly, that outlive their occupants? Perhaps this person has asked three questions in sort of like quick succession, so this may have to be our last sort of treatment, but maybe those will give a bit more sharh. So, as an architect, please explain the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ on the expansion of cities versus smaller cities, and then what is your understanding of the concept of shopping?
What is the hadith?
I'm not actually sure. It's saying the Prophet ﷺ described a hadith on the expansion of cities versus smaller cities. I'm not sure what the reference is to the hadith. No more is said. So
If you
perhaps.
say it, but I know that there is hadith شر مال أنفق في البناء أما إن كل بناء وبان على صاحبه إلا مال إلا ماله.
Okay.
Does he mean
Someone is
this hadith?
saying what you were explaining about, i.e., reviving the land requires to acquire land is somewhat the stance of the permaculture movement. So he's quoting you. I don't know if you can see that over here, or he or she. I don't know if it's a she. Reviving the land to acquire the land is somewhat the stance of the permaculture movement. The Ihya al-Mawat. So it's not a hadith, it's the principle of Ihya. Man
No,
Ahya al-Mawat فهو.
it is 17 hadith من أحيا أرضا ميتة فهي له الأرض أرض الله والعباد عباد الله وأرض من أحياها. So what is the question regarding إحياء?
So it's just saying that if you're going to build a house that then is going to outlive you, how does that affect the idea of Ihya al-Mawat?
Yeah, if you revive a land, then next generation can inherit that house.
Right.
So what's that is the
Doesn't that create a situation of the concentration of property over time, or
no, because now we're thinking in a way that house is a commodity.
yes.
If we think of a house as an object
Right.
to be used,
Right.
yes, of course, I built a good, nice house for myself,
Right.
and then that's inherited to my family. Now look at the Muslim cities. This is important. You will find most houses similar to each other. Right?
Right.
They resemble each other.
On the outside.
And you will find that the highest person income house maybe 2-3 times the size of a poorer house. So you don't see this discrepancy as it is these days. Why is that?
Right.
Why is that? Because there is conventions. From where does this convention come? Let me give an example. Now, if we have time, it is a long subject, but I'll explain it. How long we have?
Technically, we have about 2 minutes. Perhaps
It's impossible, but
the last point that you're making.
okay, there is a problem. Many say Islamic legal system. I say Shari'a. Why we say Islamic legal system? Because we are using the Western template of law to read the Islamic legal system. How does this relate to convention? If there is a law these days that you cannot build a wall without these specifications, and they will give you the specifications, your hands are tied, you have to follow the rules. But the Prophet's hadith, لا يمنعن جاركم من أن يغرس خشبا في جداره. You should not prohibit your neighbor from using your wall to nail their woods to make a wall. This would lead to the people to come together to decide the location of the wall, the size of the wall, and so on. Now, when I built the wall between me and you, the experience I got from this wall, because the system is not codified, Sharia is not codified, will be transcend my experience. I will share it with my next neighbor, third neighbor. The wall between us is made of mud. I thought it is not that good. The next wall I built it with stone, and so on. Gradually, how many walls in the city or in the town? Thousands.
Right, right,
In no time, we reach to the perfect solution of the perfect world for that site.
right,
What happened now? The whole society's knowledge molded together to
right,
give us the best world.
right, right,
And that becomes a convention.
right.
When it becomes convention, when I built a house, according to the convention, I'm not saying we should impose conventions. I will explain that later, okay? If we have time. But let's assume that the convention, if I built a house, the convention, I'll give it to my next generation, other generation. If it's not divide, that's another issue. They will have a house as a beginner in their life as an advantage.
Right.
But it's not big advantage. Why? Because others who don't have house migrate from other places because the city has more or this town has more uh, processing materials
Right.
like gold or whatever. They
Right.
can easily build a house. And they have few slides I didn't show them today. How people start from a guy married with just a room and a toilet. Gradually, with his friends, he built a house because there is an image of his head how the house should be because there is a convention.
Right.
And gradually, he will have a good house rather than being a person who rent and keep paying rent and become maybe broke, work very hard. No, now he is. We are building. This is very important. Sharia leads to creating very super, I couldn't say super, very uh, uh, aziz, very
Right.
dignified individual.
Right.
How you do that? If he has a house, if he has a job, I should put the lamp on. If he has a job, if he has a land, if he has something that he owns, he is very dignified. Now our society is composed of weak people
Right.
because of the resources.
Right.
So house is very, very important and it is accessible in terms of material. Imagine Luqta has
Yes.
something to do with housing. Luqta, something that you pick up from the street and it's a mechanism.
Right.
So it's group of mechanisms that work together
Right.
lead to dignified person. And this is important for ubudiyya. If you read the book of Ibn Taymiyyah about ubudiyya,
Right.
how can God think of this question? How God will give us a system that
Subhan.
make us slave to each other? Because our love will not be to God.
Subhan.
For our love to be totally to God, our heart should be free from loving ministers, uh, those who
Subhan.
hold positions. He will
Subhan.
give my son scholarship. He will give me a possibility to be hospitalized in this hospital and so on. Our life is all based on seeking things from others, and
Right.
we are therefore slaves to them, not to God.
Subhanallah. May Allah change that condition for us, or help us change our own conditions. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Jazakumullah khairan. I mean, this is very much, even though I didn't address a certain set of questions that I was myself sort of thinking about in terms of linking this far closer and more explicitly to Ummatics as an aspiration, as a project, which is a project of thought leadership. But in a sense, what you're talking about is working precisely in this domain. You're offering, I think, an important and, as I can only repeat, ambitious and aspirational ummatic imaginary, as it were, for us to engage with. And I'm very glad that you are willing to come back to host perhaps further questions, perhaps going over further other slides that you wanted to as well. But I can only thank you, Dr. Jamil, for a really, I think, a tour de force and a very wide-ranging discussion on questions that I think will have us thinking for a long time. And I would encourage all of our listeners to pick up the book in Arabic, or if you're able to find other resources in other languages, people you can encourage them to try and translate sections of
Just
the
there
book.
is one very, very interesting question I saw. Has a doctor heard of about a Spanish system where workers own part of the businesses they work in and part and profit share? Yes, it is. It is good system, much better than capitalism, but
Right.
it's not even close to Islam. Islam was much better.
MashaAllah. Barakallah
Mm.
fi. جزاكم الله. It's a wonderful note to conclude on بإذن الله تعالى. Once again, جزاكم الله خيرا الأستاذ الدكتور جميل أكبر. And I thank the brothers behind the scenes for organizing this and managing the logistics of it from Ummatics. So بارك الله فيكم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. And inshallah, we look forward to hosting Dr. Jamil again in the near future. And we look forward.
Let's remember this finally. والعصر إن الإنسان في خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. That's important. وتواصوا بالحق.
Working together, inshallah.
تواصوا بالحق. حق. The whole subject was حق.
عفوا.
The whole subject we're revolving around today was حق. قصة حق.
جزاكم الله خيرا. أكرمكم الله. نراكم على خير بإذن الله تعالى. جزاكم الله خيرا for all attendees as well. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.